Hey guys, I noticed that recently a lot of my subscriptions have been doing videos on their strategy guides and such, so I figured I'd do one as well. And I'll just let you know that I'm not huge into strategy guides. A lot of my guides, just to warn you guys, I haven't even used. Some of them I got for free, some of them I got after I played the game. So I got Shenmue for the Dreamcast. When I got the game, I never really made it that far to begin with, so I never really had a use for the guide. When I went back to it recently, I used this a little bit. It seemed like a pretty helpful guide. But once again, I just could not make it more than a couple hours into the game. But I definitely want to finish that game someday. I can see it has the potential, but I just keep getting sidetracked with other games. Final Fantasy IV for the DS. Great guide to have. Only because, they added some new content in terms of abilities and augments, they call them. And they're pretty hidden throughout the world, so I like to use this guide for that. And it's got some pretty good maps, 3D maps, and some good strategies for the bosses and everything like that, because they changed up the gameplay in the remake. The Fallout 3 Collector's Edition guide, awesome guide. It's very thick, and it's loaded with information. Like, if you have Fallout, the guides are essential. Either one, the Collector's or the regular, no too big difference. But they really don't waste any space in here. It's loaded with, all the hidden items and the quests and everything. It's an awesome book to have for Fallout. We use this one a lot. Valkyrie Profile Lenneth, I got this after I got the game, but I would recommend getting a strategy guide. This is for the PSP version for the game, only because this game is pretty hardcore in terms of how RPGs go. You train your characters and you send them off to fight in Ragnarok, so it's an RPG game where you train characters and get rid of them. Pretty unique, and definitely worth getting because there's a lot of playable characters. I just got the Mass Effect guide because it was free, and I plan on going back to it soon, eventually, for the sequel, and using this guide to see how it is, because Mass Effect's a good game, but I was never able to finish it. I just got this one as well very recently. I don't have the game yet, but it was the last one in the store, so I figured I'd buy it before it was sold out, and that's Star Ocean: The Last Hope for 360. Very thick guide. It seems like it's very detailed, actually. A lot of maps, a lot of pictures, everything about the item synthesis and all this kind of stuff. So it seems like it's going to be a pretty good guide. The Dragon Quest IV guide for DS. This guide was not useful to me at all. Dragon Quest IV is a very bare bones, traditional RPG. The only time I needed this guide was for maybe a boss battle or so, but definitely not an essential guide whatsoever. Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII. I didn't really use this guide that much when I played the game. I enjoyed playing Final Fantasy without a guide, really, just to avoid, spoilers on bosses and what characters I was going to be meeting next. But it's a very thick guide, and, from what I did glance through of it, loaded with information, especially on all the side quests that are in the game, because the game is very side quest focused. One of the most useless guides I ever bought, and by no means for a bad game, LittleBigPlanet is awesome, but I bought the guide and never had to use it once, because first of all, the tutorials for making the levels are all done excellent in the game already. They repeat themselves in this guide, and for the single player, you definitely do not need a guide. It's not the type of game where you're going to stop and check a guide because you feel lost. You're always progressing. They do a good job of, never getting stuck. And really the best part about the guide was the big poster that came with it. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, I sold this game. I got the guide after I had it anyway, so never got a chance to see how good it was. Sealed guide for the orange box. Final Fantasy Tactics War of the Lions PSP guide. I got this after I got the game, but I would still definitely recommend a guide for Final Fantasy Tactics because it's a very challenging strategy RPG game. So I'm sure this guide will probably do you pretty good. Dragon Quest Rocket's Line for the DS. Very simplistic game. I got this guide after I got the game for a pretty good price. Don't need the guide whatsoever, though. It's a very simple game. Grandia 3 for the PS2. Excellent PS2 RPG. I got this after I played the game as well. But if I ever go back and restart it or something like that, I'll definitely check this guide out. The battle system in this game is awesome. I never really felt like I needed a guide, but what are you going to do? They make strategy guides for everything these days. Jak and Daxter, the Precursor Legacy for PS2. Don't recall ever using this one. It's a very thin guide. The thing I don't like about this guide is they reuse a lot of the same pictures, so it's very redundant. But if I ever go back and play Jak and Daxter, I don't think I'd use the guide anyway. That game is just fun, finding the items by yourself. Twilight Princess, Legend of Zelda. Wii guide. This has been mint used, basically unopened since I bought it. I got it for free when I bought the game, and you know, I've never used it. I plan on keeping it in mint, pristine condition, because Zelda is the type of game to me where, you know, I don't think you really need to use a guide. It'll spoil it. Tales of Vesperia for 360. This is a good guide. I used it quite a bit while I was playing the game. Even though most of the time in the game is spent in battles, because the battles are ridiculously fun, it's still a pretty good guide for a very good game on 360. The Legend of Zelda Phantom Hourglass Special Edition guide. Didn't use this one that much at all because I want to kind of keep it in nice condition, because it is a very nice guide. Once again, though, Zelda games not the type of games that I feel I need to use guides for, and you know, I never really got that much in the Phantom Hourglass anyway. One of my most used guides of all time, that's Final Fantasy XII. I had a, you know, bookmark for certain spots in the strategy guide so that I didn't have to flip through it and chance, you know, spoiling a boss that was coming up. And that's one thing I hate about RPG strategy guides, which is why I don't have a lot at all for Final Fantasy games. So you gotta like look at a certain chart, or you're just trying to find where you left off. Oftentimes you'll get spoiled so much in terms of bosses and events and characters and all that kind of stuff. So that's the main reason why I don't have guides for a lot of the Final Fantasy games. And you know, I just like playing through those games without guides, but this is an awesome guide. It's loaded with information for the side quests, optional bosses, all the enemies, the dungeons. I use this guide so much, and it's one of my favorite guides. Definitely worth owning. The totally unauthorized Yoshi Story guide for Nintendo 64. This is as unofficial as it gets. They basically have nothing to do with Nintendo, and they tell you right down here. I don't ever recall using this guide. Yoshi Story is the type of game where, you know, I don't think you ever needed to use a guide for that game. Very simple platformer. Probably the best thing about it was telling you where the black and white Yoshis were. Sanju Kazuma guide, another thin, old school guide. I miss these little guides back when they were like $12. But this, don't ever recall using this either. Once again, platformers, you know, the type of games that I just like to play through, not have to stop and look at a guide to find all the items, because that's the fun of a platformer. Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, not a huge fan of the game, but I bought this guide way after I got the game, mainly just for the poster, so I never used it. Same thing goes for this Paper Mario guide. Bought it way after I played it, mainly for the poster as well. Paper Mario is not the type of game, though, that you want a strategy guide for. It's very simple, very straightforward, maybe for a couple of the secrets in the game, but otherwise, probably don't need this guide. The unauthorized Super Mario 64 guide, terrible cover art, but I guess they have to do that because it's unauthorized. I guess they can't use Mario's face on the cover. I don't know what's up with it. I kind of remember using this guide. It's very picture oriented, so there's, you know, most of the walkthroughs for the stars and everything are more dealt with pictures than text. So if you're the type of person that wants, you know, a picture walkthrough instead of a text walkthrough, this is a very good guide. A lot of pictures in there. Star Ocean Till the End of Time for the PS2. I got this after I got the game, long after. I never really made it that far into it. Seems like a pretty thick guide, but this is a huge time sink for a game. The main reason why I never got that much into it in the first place. It's like a 100-hour RPG. Dragon Quest VIII for the PS2, another guide which, in my opinion, very useless. Half of the guide is like taken up by stats on your equipment and swords and everything like that. And to me, all that information is basically already in-game, so I found it very unnecessary. Very, you know, Dragon Quest VIII was the type of game, very straightforward. You just level up, go to towns, beat the bosses. Don't really need a guide for it, so didn't really use that. Another one of my favorite guides for Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. I use this guide so much. It is even more jam-packed with information than Fallout. I mean, every page, nothing wasted. Walls and walls of text for every quest. Everything you can do in this game. You know, finding all the secret items, and it helped me out so much. Because Oblivion is the type of game that you really do want a walkthrough guide for. Outside of the main quest. That way, you know, you can kind of see what kind of mini quests you want to do, or side quests, and, you know, see what items and rewards you get for them. Awesome guide. Definitely recommend this. I have the guide for Devil May Cry 4 only because I got it for free. I don't even have the game. Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. I kind of remember using this one. Not that much though, because like I said, Zelda type of games that I don't really want to use a guide for. Sonic Chronicles Dark Brotherhood, I beat this like almost when I was done with the game. Very useless guide, only because the game is so easy, you definitely don't need a strategy guide for it. and God of War Chains of Olympus for the PSP. I bought this. I got the guide first because it was free, and then I got the game after. Used it a little bit, but didn't really have a need for it much, except for maybe a boss battle or two. I almost forgot to mention the Persona 4 guide, and I must say, if you have the game and you're starting off new or you plan on getting it, this is almost essential. The amount of information that they cram in here, it's unbelievable. I mean, the data tables of fusing personas, all the helpful information that if you went into this game without this guide, because it's not really noob friendly starting up Persona 4, this guide helps you through that. You know, it's got all the data tables, you know, every day of the week of the month, tells you what events are coming up, so you don't gotta always, you know, kind of remember in game. Very helpful. I love this guide. So, here's my guides. You know, not a huge collection, but the nice thing about strategy guides for video games, especially for RPGs, is their value tends to go up, way up, sometimes more than the game itself. So it's a pretty nice thing to collect. And I hope you enjoyed watching, guys.